the secret hidden in her blood. The underground shelter shook violently as massive warships entered orbit above Carand 9. Dust rained from the ceiling. Warning alarms echoed through the tunnels. General Varkos stood calmly inside the destroyed chamber while elite soldiers surrounded the exits with glowing rifles. Princess Lyra slowly stepped backward beside Ethan. There was nowhere left to run. Varkos smiled coldly. "You fought well, human," he said. "But this ends now." Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle despite the blood running down his injured shoulder. His breathing had become heavier. He was exhausted, outnumbered, and completely trapped. But he still refused to lower his weapon. Varkos studied him for a moment with strange curiosity. "Interesting," the general said softly. "Most humans care only about survival." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Maybe you've met the wrong humans." Before Varkos could answer, sudden explosions shook the outer tunnels. Everyone turned toward the entrance. A loud alarm echoed from one of the enemy soldiers' helmets. "General! Unknown ships just entered the atmosphere." Varkos frowned immediately. "What?" Another explosion thundered outside. Then heavy gunfire erupted across the desert cliffs. Ethan looked toward Lyra in confusion. But the princess seemed just as shocked. A second soldier rushed toward Varkos. "Our perimeter forces are under attack." Varkos's expression darkened instantly. Without another word, he turned toward his troops. "Secure the princess," he ordered coldly. "Kill the human." The moment the soldiers moved, Ethan fired. The tunnel exploded into chaos. Blaster fire flashed through the darkness. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward a side passage while explosions tore through the shelter behind them. The entire mining system was collapsing. Rock and metal crashed from the ceiling as screams echoed through the tunnels. Ethan and Lyra barely escaped falling debris while running deeper underground. Finally, they reached an old emergency hangar hidden beneath the cliffs. Inside rested a small smuggling ship covered in dust and rust. Lyra stared at it. "This thing still flies?" Ethan looked at the damaged ship silently. "I hope so." Behind them, distant gunfire continued echoing underground. Varkos's soldiers were still searching. Ethan quickly activated the ship's power systems. At first, nothing happened. Then suddenly the engines roared to life. "Good enough," Ethan muttered. The hangar doors slowly opened toward the desert night. Without wasting another second, Ethan launched the ship directly into the storm-filled sky. Enemy fighters immediately chased after them. Laser fire streaked across the darkness. The small smuggling ship shook violently while Ethan pushed the engines beyond safe limits. "You know how to fly this thing?" Lyra shouted. "Not really." That answer did not comfort her. The ship barely escaped the atmosphere before entering hyperspace. Everything finally became silent. For the first time in hours, neither of them spoke. Only the soft sound of damaged engines filled the ship. Lyra sat quietly near the cockpit window, staring into the endless blue lights of hyperspace. She looked exhausted, broken, alone. Ethan slowly sat across from her. "So," he said carefully, "why does Varkos want you alive?" Lyra remained silent for several seconds. Then she finally spoke. "Because of my blood." Ethan frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Lyra looked down at the glowing markings on her hands. "These markings are not natural," she whispered. "They come from something ancient." She slowly explained the truth. Thousands of years ago, before the rise of modern galactic empires, an advanced civilization called the Celestials ruled the stars. They built powerful gateways between galaxies. Ancient weapons. Machines capable of controlling entire fleets. But eventually the Celestials disappeared without explanation. Only ruins remained. Over time, one secret became known among the royal bloodlines. The celestial systems could only be activated by specific genetic markers hidden within the Etherian royal family. That was why Lyra's family ruled the empire for generations. Not because of politics. Because they carried the ancient bloodline. Ethan listened carefully. And Varkos wants that power. Lyra nodded slowly. He believes the celestial weapons can make him ruler of the entire galaxy. But if that's true, Ethan asked quietly, why didn't he already use them? Lyra looked directly at him. Because there is one final problem. Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly. The systems do not respond to Etherians alone. Ethan felt something cold move through his chest. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated, then finally answered. The ancient records mention another species connected to the Celestials. She paused. Humans. The cockpit became silent. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. We thought humans were extinct outside the outer colonies, Lyra admitted softly. Most of the galaxy fears humanity because nobody truly understands your species. Ethan leaned back slowly, trying to process everything. The entire galaxy was hunting this princess because of ancient alien technology. And somehow humanity was connected to it all. Suddenly, warning alarms flashed across the cockpit. Ethan immediately checked the scanner. His face darkened. We've got company. Multiple ships had appeared behind them in hyperspace. Unknown vessels. Fast. Very fast. Lyra's expression turned pale as the symbols appeared on the screen. No, she whispered. Ethan looked at her. What is it? Lyra stared at the approaching fleet with fear in her glowing eyes. Every ship carried the symbol of the former Imperial Emperor. The symbol of her dead father. But that was impossible. Because the Emperor's entire fleet had supposedly been destroyed. Then suddenly, a transmission signal appeared on the cockpit screen. An unknown voice echoed through the ship. Princess Lyra, do not be afraid. The voice paused. We have been searching for you. The transmission screen slowly activated, and an enormous hidden war fleet emerged from hyperspace around them. Thousands of warships filled the darkness of space. The lost Imperial fleet had survived. Red warning lights flashed across Ethan's underground shelter. The scanner screen showed dozens of enemy signals moving through the desert above them. Search drones. Heavy transports. Armed soldiers. They were surrounding the cliffs from every direction. Princess Lyra stared at the screen silently. They found us too quickly, she whispered. Ethan already knew what that meant. The enemy had tracked something from the crashed ship. Or someone had followed them without being seen. Either way, there was no more time. The shelter would soon become a battlefield. Ethan quickly grabbed weapons from an old metal locker near the tunnel wall. Most of them were damaged mining rifles and modified scavenger tools. Nothing special. Nothing powerful. But Ethan knew how to survive with very little. Lyra slowly stood despite her injuries. You must leave, she told him. If they discover you helped me, they will kill you. Ethan loaded ammunition into an old pulse rifle. They're gonna kill me either way now. You still have time, Lyra insisted weakly. Take your crawler and escape through the eastern valley. Ethan shook his head. No. Lyra looked at him in confusion. No hesitation. No fear. Just a simple answer. Nobody had ever refused an order from her like that before. You do not understand, she said quietly. Those soldiers are not normal Imperial troops. Ethan finally looked directly at her. I know exactly what they are. He checked the scanner again. The enemy forces had stopped moving. That meant only one thing. They were preparing to attack. Ethan immediately shut down the shelter lights. Darkness filled the underground tunnels except for the faint glow of emergency panels. Then he opened an old storage room filled with mining explosives. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. You were expecting war? Ethan gave a dry smile. On Karen 9? Always. For the next several minutes, Ethan moved quickly through the underground tunnels, placing explosives near narrow passageways and support beams. The abandoned mining network beneath the cliffs was confusing and unstable. Perfect for traps. Lyra watched him silently while leaning against the tunnel wall. Even injured, she tried helping where she could. But what surprised her most was how calm Ethan remained. No panic. No desperation. Just focus. Humans were supposed to be reckless monsters according to Galactic history records. Yet this man risked his life for someone he barely knew. It made no sense to her. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the cliffs above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. The attack had begun. Enemy soldiers entered the outer tunnels almost immediately. Through small security monitors, Ethan watched black armored troops move carefully through the darkness with military precision. They know what they're doing, Lyra warned softly. Ethan nodded once. So do I. Moments later, the first explosion detonated. The entire tunnel system shook violently. Several enemy soldiers disappeared in a wave of fire and collapsing rock. Screams echoed underground. Before the surviving troops could recover, Ethan opened fire from a hidden side tunnel. Precise shots struck 2 soldiers directly through their helmets. The others fired back instantly. Blue plasma blasts tore through the darkness. Ethan moved before they could target him properly. Fast. Silent. Like a ghost inside the tunnels. The soldiers pushed deeper underground, but every path became a trap. Explosions collapsed tunnels behind them. Hidden mines shattered their formations. Narrow passageways forced them into close combat where their numbers meant nothing. Again and again, Ethan struck them from the shadows. Lyra watched through the monitors in disbelief. One human. Against an entire military strike team. And somehow he was winning. More enemy transports landed outside. Dozens of additional soldiers entered the cliffs. The underground battle became chaos. Blaster fire lit the tunnels blue and red. Smoke filled the shelter. Broken metal and rock crashed everywhere. Then Ethan suddenly cried out in pain. A plasma round struck his shoulder while he protected the entrance leading toward Lyra's room. He stumbled backward against the wall. Blood spread across his jacket. Lyra immediately rushed toward him despite her injuries. "You're hit." "I noticed," Ethan muttered painfully. But even wounded, he grabbed another rifle and kept moving. Lyra stared at him. No royal soldier had ever fought like this for her. Not even the Imperial Guard. This human owed her nothing. Yet he refused to abandon her. For the first time in her life, Lyra began understanding something important. Humans were not feared because they were cruel. Humans were feared because they would stand and fight long after others surrendered. Suddenly, all gunfire stopped. Silence spread through the tunnels. Ethan's expression darkened immediately. "That's not good." Heavy footsteps echoed from the main entrance. Slow. Confident. Different from the others. Then a deep voice spoke through the darkness. "Impressive." A tall figure emerged from the smoke wearing black military armor marked with silver command symbols. Several elite soldiers followed behind him. Princess Lyra's face turned pale instantly. "Varkos." General Varkos stepped forward calmly, his cold eyes studying the destroyed tunnels around him. Dead soldiers covered the ground behind him. "You caused me considerable trouble, human," he said quietly. Ethan raised his rifle despite the blood running down his arm. Varkos barely reacted. Instead, he looked toward Lyra. "There you are, Princess." Lyra stepped backward slowly. Hatred burned in her glowing eyes. "You murdered my family." Varkos remained calm. "Your family was weak. The Empire needed stronger leadership." The tunnel became silent. Then Varkos looked back at Ethan. "I will offer you one chance." His voice echoed coldly through the underground chamber. Give me the princess, and you leave this planet alive. For several seconds, nobody moved. Lyra slowly closed her eyes. She already knew what most people would choose. Survival. But Ethan simply lifted his rifle toward Varkos. I think, Ethan said quietly, you should leave instead. For the first time, Varkos smiled. Not with amusement. With danger. Then suddenly, the entire shelter shook violently. A deep mechanical sound echoed from above the planet. Varkos glanced upward calmly. My fleet has entered orbit, he announced. Ethan's scanner suddenly exploded with warning signals. Massive warships were descending from the sky. The real invasion had just begun. The chamber door slowly began to open. Ethan reacted instantly. He grabbed Princess Lyra before the enemy soldiers could see her and pulled her behind a broken energy console near the back of the royal chamber. Heavy armored footsteps entered the room seconds later. 3 black armored soldiers scanned the area with glowing rifles. One of them stepped closer to the shattered royal bed. Another checked the damaged control panels. Their leader spoke coldly through his helmet. She was here. Ethan held his breath. Lyra was barely conscious in his arms. Her body felt cold, and blood covered parts of her silver clothing. If she made even the smallest sound, they were dead. The soldiers continued searching the chamber carefully. One moved closer to Ethan's hiding place. Closer. Closer. Then suddenly, an explosion echoed somewhere deeper inside the ship. The entire corridor shook violently. Emergency lights flickered. The soldiers immediately turned toward the noise. Lower engine decks just collapsed, one soldier reported. Forget this section. Move. The group quickly left the chamber. Ethan waited several seconds before finally breathing again. He looked down at Lyra. Her glowing eyes opened slightly. You should have left me, she whispered weakly. Ethan ignored the comment. Instead, he searched the chamber for another exit. Behind the royal platform, he discovered a hidden emergency tunnel partially covered by debris. Without wasting time, he lifted Lyra carefully and carried her into the darkness below the ship. The narrow tunnel shook constantly from distant explosions above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Metal groaned around them. The warship was dying. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness while Ethan carried her through the underground passageways. Several times he heard enemy soldiers searching nearby. Once, bright flashlights passed directly over the tunnel entrance. But somehow, they remained unseen. After nearly an hour of crawling through broken maintenance shafts, Ethan finally found an old exit hatch leading outside the wreckage. Cold desert air rushed into the tunnel. Night had fully covered Karen 9. Far above the valley, large military ships floated silently in the sky like dark metal giants. Search drones moved across the desert below. They were hunting survivors. Ethan quickly carried Lyra toward his crawler, hidden between old rock formations several kilometers away. The princess finally lost consciousness completely during the journey. By the time Ethan reached his hidden shelter beneath the cliffs, the first light of morning had begun appearing over the horizon. His shelter was small, built from old mining tunnels left abandoned years ago. Nobody knew it existed. That was exactly why Ethan trusted it. He laid Lyra carefully on a medical table near the back wall. For the first time, he could properly see how badly injured she was. Burn marks covered one side of her body. Small pieces of metal were embedded near her shoulder. And strangely, faint glowing lines moved beneath her skin like blue light flowing through her veins. Ethan had never seen alien biology like this before. Using old medical supplies, he carefully treated her wounds through the night. Several times Lyra woke suddenly in fear. Each time she reached for a weapon that was no longer there. Each time Ethan calmly told her she was safe. Hours later, while Lyra rested, Ethan activated an old Galactic broadcast terminal in the corner of the shelter. Static filled the room before a news transmission appeared. A terrified reporter spoke rapidly. The Etherean Empire has officially confirmed the death of Princess Lyra following the destruction of the royal fleet 3 days ago. Military leader General Varkos has promised justice against those responsible. An image of Lyra appeared on the screen. The same woman now sleeping only a few feet away. Ethan frowned. Something felt wrong. If the Empire believed she was dead, then why were Imperial soldiers hunting her inside the wreckage? And who were the black armored troops? The broadcast suddenly changed. General Varkos himself appeared on the screen. Tall, cold-faced, wearing dark military armor. The galaxy mourns today, he announced calmly. But the enemies of the Empire will be destroyed. Ethan immediately disliked him. There was no sadness in the man's voice. Only control. The moment the broadcast ended, a weak voice came from behind him. You should not trust him. Ethan turned quickly. Lyra was awake. Weakly, she tried sitting up on the medical bed. Her glowing eyes watched the screen carefully. Varkos betrayed us, she whispered. Ethan stepped closer. What happened on that ship? For several seconds, Lyra said nothing. Pain filled her expression. Then finally she spoke. Someone inside the Empire helped them attack us. My father knew there was a traitor in the royal command. Her voice trembled slightly. But we discovered the truth too late. Ethan listened silently. The fleet was destroyed from the inside, she continued. Our own defense systems turned against us. She lowered her eyes. My mother and father are probably dead. The room became quiet. Outside, desert winds howled against the cliffs. Finally, Ethan spoke softly. So why are they hunting you? Lyra looked directly at him. Because I survived. At first, distrust remained between them. Lyra still feared humans because of ancient galactic stories describing humanity as violent and dangerous. But Ethan never threatened her. Never asked for money. Never tried to turn her in for a reward. He simply protected her. That confused her more than anything. For the first time in many years, Lyra began questioning everything she had been taught about humans. Then suddenly, a warning alarm echoed through Ethan's shelter. Both of them froze. Ethan rushed toward his scanner system. His face darkened immediately. Hundreds of red signals were moving across the desert outside. Search drones, military transports, and armored soldiers. Somehow, the enemy had found them. Lyra stared at the screen in horror. The hunters had arrived. Welcome to my channel HFY Story Hub. The desert planet Karen 9 was a place nobody wanted to live on. The world was cold at night, burning during the day, and filled with the broken remains of old wars. Rusted war machines covered the endless valleys like giant skeletons left behind by forgotten armies. Most people called it the Dead Valley. Ethan Cole called it home. Far from the crowded cities of the galaxy, Ethan survived by searching old battlefields for damaged alien technology. He sold whatever he found to traders who visited the outer colonies once every few months. It was lonely work. But Ethan liked it that way. No wars. No governments. No trouble. Just silence. That silence ended the moment the sky split open. Ethan was driving his old crawler across the desert when the stars above suddenly disappeared behind thick clouds of fire. A massive object burst through the atmosphere. The entire sky turned red. Ethan slammed the crawler to a stop as the object screamed across the heavens like a falling moon. Then came the impact. The explosion shook the desert so hard that broken metal towers collapsed in the distance. Sandstorms exploded outward across the valley floor. Ethan covered his face as dust and heat blasted over him. For several seconds, the world became nothing but noise. Then silence returned. But not for long. Warning alarms suddenly echoed from Ethan's old scanner system. Unknown military signals flooded every frequency. Ships were entering orbit. Fast. Ethan frowned. That made no sense. Nobody came to Karen 9 unless something very valuable crashed there. Slowly, he climbed out of the crawler and looked toward the burning valley. Black smoke rose into the night sky. Something enormous had crashed only a few kilometers away. Most people would have stayed away. Ethan grabbed his rifle instead. "Whatever that thing is," he muttered quietly, "someone's gonna pay a fortune for the parts." He drove toward the crash site through thick smoke and burning sand. As he got closer, the shape of the wreck became clearer. It was not a cargo ship. It was a warship. A massive alien battleship nearly half buried in the desert. Blue flames burned across its broken hull. Strange glowing symbols flickered along the damaged metal. Ethan had seen many alien ships before, but never one like this. The design looked royal, ancient, expensive, and dangerous. Then he noticed something else. Bodies. Dozens of armored soldiers were scattered across the sand outside the ship. Not scavengers. Not pirates. Royal guards. Their silver armor carried the crest of the Etherean Empire. Ethan's expression changed immediately. Everybody in the galaxy knew that symbol. The Etherians ruled thousands of worlds. And rumors said their royal family had disappeared only days ago after a terrible attack in deep space. Ethan suddenly realized this crash was much bigger than he thought. Very carefully, he moved toward the broken entrance of the ship. The inside was dark and filled with smoke. Emergency lights flashed red through the corridors. Broken machines sparked from the walls. The air smelled like burned metal and blood. Ethan stepped over several dead guards while keeping his rifle raised. Something terrible had happened here. Some bodies showed signs of blaster fire. Others looked torn apart by explosions. But there was something strange. There were no enemy bodies. Only royal guards. As if somebody had betrayed them from inside. A sudden metallic sound echoed deeper in the ship. Ethan froze. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. He quickly hid behind a damaged wall panel. A group of black armored soldiers marched through the corridor only seconds later. Their armor carried no symbols. No nation. No identity. Professional killers. One of them spoke through a distorted helmet radio. "Search every chamber. The princess must not leave this ship alive." Ethan's eyes widened. "Princess." The soldiers continued deeper into the wreckage. Ethan waited until they disappeared before slowly moving again. Now he understood why military ships had arrived so quickly. This was not a rescue mission. This was a hunt. And somehow, a royal princess was still alive inside this burning ship. Ethan should have left immediately. Any smart person would have. Instead, he kept walking deeper into the wreckage. The lower levels of the ship looked untouched by the crash. The glowing symbols on the walls became brighter. The air turned strangely cold. Then Ethan heard it. A voice. Soft. Weak. "Help." He stopped moving. For a second, he thought he imagined it. Then the voice came again. "Please." Ethan followed the sound through a damaged hallway until he reached a sealed royal chamber half buried beneath fallen metal. The door had almost been destroyed during the crash. Using all his strength, Ethan forced it open. The moment the door moved aside, he froze. A woman lay inside the chamber surrounded by broken glass and flickering blue lights. She was the most beautiful person Ethan had ever seen. Silver-white hair fell across her face. Her glowing blue eyes looked almost unreal. Strange royal markings glowed faintly across her skin. Even injured and covered in blood, she looked powerful. Royal. Otherworldly. Around her neck hung the symbol of the imperial royal family. Ethan immediately recognized her from old Galactic broadcasts. Princess Lyra. The missing daughter of the Etherean Emperor. The entire galaxy believed she was dead. But she was alive. Barely. Lyra looked up at Ethan weakly, fear visible in her glowing eyes. Then distant footsteps echoed through the corridor behind him. The black armored soldiers were coming closer. The princess reached out toward Ethan with trembling fingers. And in a soft, broken voice, she whispered, "Please, don't let them take me." The footsteps stopped outside the chamber door. Then someone slowly began opening it.